بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. So we mentioned before, we mentioned it many times, that Islam is, Brother Muhammad, he's not here, right? Brother Muhammad Sadiq is his history teacher. So he's always talking to the people, looking at history through the light of the Quran, which is very important. And so Quran and history of Quran is the same thing. Right? Somebody who doesn't know history doesn't understand anything, right? Ibn Abbas, for example, who was Tarjuman of Quran, the interpreter of the Quran, the one who taught us the Quran and was a great mufassir, he used to teach history, right? It's one of these things he does because it's important. Because if you understand history, it's like, oh, it's all the same system. There's nothing new under the sun. It's just a repetition. So, and so he's always telling people that Islam is a deen, it's not a religion. What does that mean? It means the way that we see religion is something that stays in the masjid. Okay, religion is how you talk about, maybe, what happens in a scripture, how you pray, how you do some kind of things, but it has nothing to do with real life, right? Religion that interferes with real life is not welcome because if it's telling me how to make money, if it's telling me how to deal with my wife, it's telling me how to deal with politics, it's not useful, right? So this is a concept that we have in the world, which is separation from the church from the state. That the religion should have nothing to do with politics, right? And so and that's a huge problem because that means you're telling Allah back off. That's what you're telling Allah, right? You're saying Allah, you are Akbar only in the masjid, right? The mafia guy, he goes to the church. The priest is useful in the church only, but stay there. Don't come and tell me how to run my business. Don't come and tell me I can't kill people. Don't come and tell me I can't sell this stuff. Don't tell me any of that. Right? It should stay here. When someone wants to get born and you want to bless them, bless them. When someone wants to get married, the priest is going to bless them. When somebody dies, the priest is going to make a prayer, but that's it. And unfortunately, for many Muslims, that's what it is. We come to the masjid for a prayer, for a wedding. We come to the masjid because it's Friday. I don't even know what he said, and I don't care. That's not even important. I don't know what the Quran is saying. It's not important. I just want to be blessed and go, right? That's all it is, which is wrong. The Deen talks about it, about every single thing that we do from the morning we wake up to the end, right? Every single thing that we do. And so if you look at our dunya, then if Allah's talking to us about our dunya, we mentioned this yesterday or the day before, that there's basically three things that happen in our dunya. In our worldly life, there's basically three things. There is money, and there is power, and then there is the opposite sex. That's basically the world. So if you look at, we say money makes the world go round, right? Look at the biggest kind of industries is arms, right? And pornography and things like that. Like, how do we sell things? I want to sell a watch. I get a handsome guy wearing a watch who looking next to an attractive woman. And then now the person who sees it wants to buy the watch. So I didn't use pornography itself, but I used things to do with it. What sold was this, right? How do you sell things? Any advert, you use these kind of things to do it. That's what people value. It means something. It means I'm worth something. These are very important things. These are huge things to people. Money, politics, and the opposite sex. It's a huge thing, right? A teenager, what are they trying to do? They're trying to get power because they were a child and now they're becoming an adult. They're trying to get their own power, their own freedom. They are trying to get money, which is part of the freedom and their power. And they're trying to impress the opposite sex. They're trying to find out who they are. That's how they function. So because the dunya is these three things, Allah talks about these three things. But because we're Catholic Muslims, we don't talk about these things. Because we don't want religion to talk about this, we say anything about that, right? As we mentioned the other day, you send your kid to school, right? All you want your kid to do at Islamic school is learn how to say some prayers in Arabic, and that's it, right? So I remember, Pashtun brother, for example, Patan, actually, not Pashtun, but Patan, the other side of the border. He's like, does my daughter know the sana? Like, what's sana? I was like, oh, the dua at the beginning of the prayer. Okay. So he knows that the deen is say these things. But that's not the deen. The deen is do these things. I have an understanding. So he's putting something on the 100th of the list, kind of important. If you didn't know, it's not the end of the world, right? It's not even sunnah according to some scholars. And for him, it's priority. He doesn't ask the question, is my daughter confident that Islam is the truth? That's not a question he's interested in because he's not confident and he doesn't want her to be confident because that's not what religion is. Religion is just habit. It's just a thing that we do, even if it doesn't make sense. He's not asking, does my daughter know, for example, does she understand how Allah wants her to interact with the opposite sex? No, because in fact, if I told her, I get told off, right? Because that would be, no, that's inappropriate, right? If we brought that up to her, that would be inappropriate. So we see the appropriate is inappropriate, and it's everything's upside down. So if you read the Quran, it's like Sheikh Farid, all you talk about is it. That's because all is here. It keeps talking about it again and again and again, because these are very important. Talk to any human being and say, tell me any three things that are more important than this in their dunyawi life. There's nothing. That's the bread and butter of their life. These are these things that make them and break them and how they feel about themselves, etc. Right? Okay. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we already read 231, but I'll read it again. It says, when you divorce women, so number one, there's divorce in Islam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regulates this, right? So when you divorce women and they have almost reached the end of their waiting period, what does that mean then? It means you divorce a woman and you divorce her once. So number one, there's a hierarchy. You divorce her, she doesn't divorce you. That's fundamental to understand, right? Fundamental to understand. We are Muslims, we're not Westerners, right? We are Muslims, we are not Westerners. So when a woman marries herself to somebody, she is giving up a part of her freedom. She's not giving up her money. She's not giving up her identity, so she shouldn't change her name. She shouldn't change her name, right? Unlike in the West, where she would become Mrs. Farid Dingle. That's what it used to be, to Mr. and Mrs. Farid Dingle, because when I married her, her identity is mine and her money is mine. But that's not the case in Islam. I can't tell her what to do with her money, right? And I don't change her identity. And my deeds are not her deeds and her deeds are not my deeds. But there is certain freedom that she's giving up, right? And so again, is that relevant? Is that relevant to people in the West today? Is this a discussion in the West to go to the office and speak to men in the office about what does it mean, women these days? And they're like, yeah, women these days, right? They're going to talk about a dynamic. So the dynamic between man and woman. To what extent can a man control a woman, or could a woman let herself be controlled? This is huge. This is a huge topic. It's not a small topic. And this is not what Muslims are talking about. This is what everybody talks about. This is a whole thing. And so that the nature of what is a man, what is a woman, and what is the dynamics between them is very important. So if you're married to a woman, she can walk out of the marriage whenever she wants. And she can do whatever she wants. And you're expected to appreciate it. You as a man do not appreciate the relationship, right? You don't actually appreciate the relationship. And so that's not part of your fitrah. That's not the nature of it. So she can do what she wants. But as a woman, you will never be appreciated by your husband, meaning you will never have that side of you happy until you submit. So women then in the West and now in the East have been sold a way of thinking, which is, I can do what the heck I want. You can't tell me to do anything. Get out of my face. It's my body, my right. I can do this, I can do that, And if my husband starts telling me what to do, and I'm going to put him in his place, right? So what she's doing, she's walking in a direction that she thinks is good, but is actually harming her. And obviously there's reasons. Are women oppressed? Yes, women are oppressed. Are they oppressed in the Muslim countries? Yes, they're oppressed in Muslim countries. Are they oppressed in the Eastern countries? In the West? Yes, they are. So there's a reason why she's doing this, right? Because there's oppression. But responding to oppression with oppression is not the good thing to do. Rather, get things to the balance. These are your rights, sister. These are not your rights, sister. If you want to be in a relationship with a man and feel fulfilled, you have to submit. That's how it is. Right? So that means there's somebody who has control. He decided that this relationship is not going to work. They've tried from this point of view. They tried from this point of view. He decides to end the relationship, not her. Right? And anybody who has a mother or has a sister or has a daughter will understand why. Mm-hmm. Anybody who has insaf, they look at things with it like, yeah, I've seen this, right? When you're a little kid, you don't understand it. When you're older, you're like, oh man. You see things out with, you can have respect for your mother, but you realize, hey, all women do these certain things. And so if we gave divorce to the hand of a woman, what would she do? It's like giving a gun to a kid, right? We should all be equal, right? And it's not a joke. And you go any woman with again, she's fair. She's like, yeah, man, if I had a right, she would have dipped the first week. But then she realizes after 10 years, yeah, that wouldn't be fair to her. It wouldn't be fair to her, right? Just like it's not fair to give a gun to a kid. It's not fair, right? So part of you protect people by limiting their freedom. So it's sold to people as this is oppression. It's not oppression. This is called protection. But it's sold to them as if it's oppression, right? Go ahead, brother.
When you say identity, does that mean lasting?
Yeah, who she is.
Oh.
She's not so and so. She's not part of your tribe.
Okay.
She's so and so. On Judgment Day, she's gonna be so and so, daughter of so and so. That's who she is. She's not you. She's not part of your tribe. She's not part of anybody else. And you might divorce her. She doesn't change. So the idea, for example, that in the West and certain Muslim countries that she becomes like, so in Afghanistan, you have that sometimes.
Yeah.
If one, like what will happen is if the brother dies, she has to marry his brother because she's become part of this tribe. She's somehow lost. No, that's not true. She is an individual, right? The ulama, they mention, again, financial issues. If a man stole from his wife or a wife stole from his man, for her husband, is there a difference? There's a big difference. So my wife has property in San Leandro, for example. I break in and steal a huge television. What happens to me? My hand's cut off. Why? Because her money is not mine. And it's totally separate. If I had a house in San Leandro, which I do, inshallah, it's for rent, just 8K a month. So bismillah, guys. Okay. I have a house out there, mashallah. I have a big, nice room with TV. Someone breaks in. My wife breaks in. Okay. And she steals. That's my property. Right. So she breaks into my property. If she steals my thing, we don't cut our hand off. Why? Because I spend on her, etc. Money often goes to me. So there's what's called a shubha. There's some doubt. She did something sinful, of course. She's a thief. But the point is, why is my hand cut off from stealing for my wife? Because she's a totally separate. Because she has her own, her own tax ID. She has her own tax ID. Think about it, even in America now, you might pay tax with your girlfriend, right? Yeah. Because you're considered one in Islam that you're two different people. You pay zakat separately. You're two different people. She might have to go on Hajj. You don't have to go on Hajj, right? You're two separate people. So she is her own person, right? And she's gonna answer for her own good deeds, answer for her own bad deeds. She does not become you, right? So the idea that they take your name and these something, that's not true. But there is submission. This is go to any bar tonight, right? Go to any bar and talk about submission, right? They're gonna laugh because they'll be like, bro, what are you talking about? Okay, but it's this, and it's all the same system. It's all the same system. And what's happened is there's certain systems that make people happy in life, and certain systems do not make people happy in life, right? So, for example, we mentioned before the verse of the Quran, there's good in alcohol and there's bad in it, right? So what's wrong? There's a wedding. What's wrong with getting drunk? Come on, guys. There's a lot of good that's happening, right? I saw that with my own eyes, with the collapse of American culture, and right, you see a lot of things that, for example, let's say Hispanic people have that the normal white person doesn't have because they have no society. So I saw this was like 8 o'clock in the morning. These Hispanic guys gathering together, drinking, of course, 24-hour drinking, and they're just singing a song together. Like, what's wrong with that? Nothing wrong is happening. But what happened at that party that shouldn't have happened? That fight, that murder, that inappropriate behavior, things happen. And so the system of drinking alcohol does not actually work. Alcohol is not a system that works. So similarly, a woman who's like, it's my body, my right, I can go what I want, I can do what I want. If I don't want to be part of this relationship, I'm dipping. You cannot say a single thing to me. You can't say a single thing to me. And I have, that kind of attitude does not make women happy. It's not about, men have to be happy. It doesn't make women happy. Just like you have a child at school who does studies whenever they want. And they wash their teeth whenever they want and they eat whatever they want. It does not make the child happy. So part of the way of making a child happy is limiting his freedom, right? Driving 200 miles an hour does not make you happy. So part of the way of making you, the American citizen, happy is we're going to limit your speed, right? We're going to limit your behavior because it doesn't make you happy, right? Doing cocaine doesn't make you happy. So we're going to limit your freedom. You can't say, oh, it's bad for you, but we'll leave it up to you. No, we're going to stop you doing that. So limiting freedom is a part of protecting people, right? And so this is a key thing. And obviously, this flies in the face of Western values, not freedom. I am free to do what I want. I can get into this relationship when I want, and I can do whatever I want. And I should be able, if a man can divorce his wife, then a wife can divorce her husband. Why not? And we say, no, that's not true. That's not true. Right. So it's not one is in his hands. So he divorces her. Okay. And now there's a waiting period. So she has 3 months, basically. He has 3 months to think about it. And he can take her back within that time. Again, whether she likes it or not. She's like, Alhamdulillah, the guy divorced me. But he only divorced her once. So he decided after a month, you know what? That was dumb. I shouldn't have done that. I'm taking her back. He's like, oh my God, here we go again. Right. But she signed up for it. Right. In the relationship, she signed up for it. So it says, and then either retain them honorably or let go of them honorably. Keyword honorably. Right. So what we should see in the Muslim community is amazing akhlaq in divorce. Right? It didn't work out. It didn't work out. They tried. Let's do it in a nice way. Nobody shouting, bring the family over. Okay, this is what's going to happen. By the way, instead of things blowing up at the gas station, right? And she's walking home and he walks home in the rain or something stupid like that. They realize, cool, calm, collected. This is what happened. Okay, brings the family around, says, by the way, this is what's going to happen. We tried from this angle, we tried from this angle. It's not working. Alhamdulillah. Your daughter's an amazing woman, mashallah, but we're just not compatible. Alhamdulillah. And then you go to the masjid and have some witnesses. You don't have to have witnesses, of course, in a divorce, but make it clear this is going to happen. Imam Sahib, I'm going to say this. Will that count as a divorce? Yes. What will be the repercussions? Make sure she knows what happens immediately. Make sure he knows. This is what we're going to do. Then it's done. Everyone's happy and say, by the way, I have to pay for this. You're going to have this. Everybody's happy and it's nice, right? Nice akhlaq, right? This is where we should say things. Keep her on a nice way or let go of her in a nice way, as opposed to keep her in hell, right? Most people, that's what they do. They just stay in hell, right? The marriage didn't work. And so they live in hell, horrible relationship for 10, 20, 30 years. Nobody likes it. She's not happy. He's not happy. The kids hate it. You know, the whatever, the cat knows it's horrible. The cat, whenever sees the two of them in the same room, leaves, you know, it's like, you know, it's not a joke, right? It's not a joke because that is the ummah, right? Right. And so what I'm saying here is like the fact that you're responding means it's a reality. It means the Quran is a reality, right? The Quran is talking to us, not talking to people on Mars, right? Okay. So keep them honorably, nice way. She felt really good, right? So who's the person who should be finding you your next wife, your ex-wife, right? Your ex-wife should find you your next wife because she's like, yeah, me and him were not compatible, but I'm very glad that we moved on. I'm very happy. He's a good guy, right? He's a good guy, as opposed to, A'udhu billah, you know, marriage, it was hell, divorce was hell, right? May Allah protect us, right? Either retain them honorably or let go of them honorably, but do not retain them only to harm them. So you're only staying in the marriage to harm them. Why? What's the point? So what we should see is he gets remarried and invites her to the marriage, not to hurt her and say, yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm glad again. She's the same thing. And he says, you know, there's a guy I met actually from over here, this masjid, he might be compatible for you. And it's all happy and good, right? That's how it should be, as opposed to sparks flying and missiles being shot at each other for 20 years, right? This is not good akhlaq, right? Whoever does that surely wrongs only his own soul. So key thing, my life is destroyed by my wife. My life is destroyed by my brother, Mansour. My life is destroyed by the masjid. My life is destroyed by Trump. My life is destroyed by, your life is not destroyed by anybody. Your life is destroyed by your own actions. Allah gives you a situation, you respond. You're in prison, you're throwing up, money's been taken from you, you've become a millionaire. How did you respond to that thing? That's all. That's you. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in Judgment Day, innama hiya a'malukum. These are just your actions. Nobody else. I'm not talking about anybody else's actions. Just what you did. Right? Oh, that guy, because he lied about me and I lost my job, that ruined my life. Nobody ruined your life apart from yourself. Just you and your own actions, right? So everybody likes to point the finger at somebody else. In reality, it's got nothing to do with anything, right? So again, let's look at Muslim Spain. What happened to Muslim Spain? Who destroyed Muslim Spain? The Muslims. So the Muslims, they divided instead of united. And then each one person wants to hold on to their rule. So then you had little capital, little cities. Every single city was trying to get power. The Christians reach out to each person. Hey, should I help you get more power? Yes, please. I want more power. Help. We'll team up to destroy your brother over there. They did the same thing in Palestine. So little tiny places during the Crusades, you'd have Muslims teaming up with the Crusaders against the Muslims. What do we see today? Same thing. Same thing. So nothing is destroying the Muslims apart from the Muslims, right? Nothing is destroying me or you apart from ourselves, right? They didn't wrong us. You can't wrong Allah. You can't do anything to Allah. Take every single mushaf, urinate it on it, burn it, put it on Instagram, say every defamation of Islam possible, nuke the Kaaba, say every single bad thing. You've done nothing to Allah, nothing. You can't harm Allah. You can only harm yourself. You can't harm other people. You can only harm yourself. Right? Nobody can harm you. You can only harm yourself. Right? So whoever does that has only wronged themselves. Do not take Allah's revelations lightly. So this is what happens. I've seen this with my own eyes. People who, they're kind of people when it comes to halal food, very strict, right? They want to know the third cousin of the cow that you're eating right now. Was he Muslim or not? And what kind of Muslim, right? Was the third cousin of the cow being slaughtered out? Was he Brelvi or Diobandi, right? Okay, they want to know these things. But then when it comes to riba is not an issue because that's not to do with halal food. Business is not to do with, it's got to do because, so cussing left, right, and center, the income is haram. You tell them, by the way, what you're doing is haram. They're like, because they never heard of it before, so they ignore it. Right? But the deen talks about your money, the deen talks about your food, the deen talks about your relationships, the deen talks about your every single thing in life. Every single thing in life, right? So they took the signs of Allah as a joke, right? Remember Allah's favor upon you as well as upon you as well as the book and the wisdom. He has sent down for your guidance. Be mindful of Allah. Ward off Allah's punishment. So somebody has taqwa in halal food, but they don't have taqwa with the way they talk to their wife or talk to their husband, the way they talk to these things, etc. It's totally off. And now that Allah has made perfect knowledge of all things He told you. But now we have another scenario. So now the iddah has finished. So we have two scenarios. You divorced her once or you divorced her twice, and you didn't take her back. And she went through 3 periods. Right? So now imagine, again, a super backward society where you don't even know when your wife is on a period because you don't talk about that because it's inappropriate. So what's going to happen in a marriage? Let's say someone has a daughter, she doesn't know what a period is and to begin with. She comes and prays Taraweeh, mashallah, 20 rakahs of haram prayer because she's not allowed to pray. And then she goes home and she's touching the mushaf, which is haram. And then she gets married and she doesn't know when her period starts, when her period stops. She doesn't know what's halal or haram with her husband. And then when she gets divorced, they don't even know when the waiting period starts or ends. So therefore, they don't know what's going on. وَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا آيَاتِ اللَّهِ هُزُوًا. Don't take Allah's signs as a joke. It's all a joke from beginning to end. You sent her to Makkah for the wrong reason. Everything was off. You did things on your way as opposed to her way. So we have to understand these are conversations we have to have, right? We have conversations we have to have. If our wives are not having these conversations with our daughters, then you have to find an auntie. Somebody has to have these. People have to know stuff, right? So she has to know what's happening with the period, when is it starting, when it's ending, etc. So when her 3 periods are finished, the marriage is now over. She can go and get remarried, right? And so that's all great. And also the two could get remarried. So he divorced her once. 10 years later, she's not married and he's not married. They're like, you know what? We have 1 kid. We've both changed. Let's try again. That's totally fine for them to remarry, right? And then he divorced her again once more. And she finished her waiting period and he married her again. But if you divorce her 3 times, right? Three strikes and out, right? So Allah saying move on, right? We mentioned this yesterday, but we're just mentioning again. Says when you have divorced your women and they finish, where is it? And they have finished their waiting period, do not prevent them from remarrying their ex-husbands if they come to an honorable agreement. They can do that. But so there's a difference between taking your wife back in her waiting period as opposed to remarrying. So you divorced your wife and then she finished her iddah and you're like, hey, actually, let's get remarried. Can you get remarried? Yes, if you divorced her once or twice. You can't get remarried if you divorced her 3 times. What if she doesn't want to marry you now? She's not your wife now. She doesn't want to marry you. She doesn't want to marry you. Whereas but in the waiting period, she's like, I'm really hoping that this guy does not take me back because this is super annoying. I don't like being married to this guy. And you make the decision, no, I think we should try it again. Okay. So she doesn't have a choice in the waiting period. She has a choice afterwards because it's a new marriage. Last time the mahar was 5K. She's like, this guy, I'm going to ask for 50K. You don't want to pay 50K? Don't get married to me. Right? So she now knows. Right? And so, so a different picture, right? Okay. And just a side point, the mahar by default should be as affordable, right? So if you can imagine, here's something reasonable. You're in California. How much can an average 20-year-old make in California in 1 month? 3, 4, 10? No. So you made the mahar. This guy's 20, and the guy got married for 30K. That's not reasonable because that's not what you could normally make in a month. So what you're doing now, there's statistics among them, right? The more people spend on the wedding and on these things, the highest divorce rate, right? So it shouldn't be high by default, right? I believe Sayyidina Umar, I believe he said this. He said, had high mahars, right, a high dowry being a way of honoring your daughter. Like I need to respect my daughter, right? Like I need to kind of show that respect. Then the Prophet ﷺ would have done that with his daughters, right? Who of all women on planet Earth should have more respect apart from the daughters of the Prophet ﷺ? So had it been a way of, so how do you honor your daughter? You honor your daughter by teaching her the deen, by teaching her haya, by teaching her how to dress, how to carry herself, and finding her a good husband, not by getting her a big ring or getting her 5 wedding dresses, right? It's not very useful, right? If you look at, again, Sayyidina Ali and Sayyidina Fatima's marriage, it's very simple. Very, very simple. They had no carpet, so they put soft sand on the floor. The Prophet taught them, dua to make, etc. They're very, very simple things, right? So give your daughter akhlaq, don't give her money, because money is not very useful. Right? Okay. So it says, do not prevent them from remarrying their ex-husbands if they come to an honorable agreement. This is enjoyed on whoever has faith in Allah and His last day. If you don't have faith in Allah and the last day, do whatever you want. This is purer and more dignifying for you. Allah knows and you do not know. So if someone's culture says, no, if they get married, they can't get married again. I don't care about your culture. It doesn't matter anything. It doesn't mean anything. Or divorce is unacceptable. Divorce is in the Quran, right? Divorce is in the Quran. So it shouldn't be, again, trigger happy divorce people, right? But it's not. So we have to have these two extremes. How things were in Christianity, there's no divorce. It's impossible. You just live in hell and that's it. And then we have stupid people who get divorced every 2 days, right? That's just on his tongue. And then we have Islam, which is you're the man. You make a decision. Cool, calm, collected. This is the best thing to do. Alhamdulillah, go ahead. And don't be scared. Oh, people will say, or what will happen, right? That's not irrelevant. So then it says nursing children after divorce. Nursing children after divorce. Divorced mothers will breastfeed their offspring for 2 whole years. So here, the default, right, is that the human body is sacred. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the human body sacred. So the default is you cannot donate blood. The default is you can't donate organs. The default is nothing of your body could be used because it's sacred, right? And so when we donate blood, you only do that when there's an absolute necessity. Donating an organ only when there's absolute necessity, right? And one of these things then is also the milk of the mother. So according to many scholars, they say this is something, the milk of a mother is, again, part of her body. It is not something you could sell. It is not something you could consume, and it is only allowed for children by duress, because how else are they going to survive, right? And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Hawlain Kamilain, 2 complete lunar years, that is the maximum, because it was only given as an exception to a rule, and so that's the maximum. After 2 lunar years, it is not permissible to breastfeed your children. You can't do that, right? Other ulama, they say milk is not like that. Milk is just something that is pure, just like milk of any other living thing, and it's not an issue, right? And so I remember my mum mentioning this. She was in Palestine, and she said there was a little kid who was a really tough little kid. He's toughy. He's like 4 or 5 year old, running around shouting and kicking the ball, and then he runs into his mum and pulls up a top and starts. That's like really weird. It's like a 5 year old. And so according to some ulama, that's totally haram. You can't do that because this is a 4 year old. What are you talking about? According to other ulama, it's okay, right? But we should be careful, basically. For those who wish to complete the nursing period. Now listen, so then it says the child's father will provide reasonable maintenance and clothing for the mother during that period. So as long as she is, so there's the waiting period. So she has those 3 months, and then there is a nursing period, which is something else. So if she's going to nurse, then he's got to support her for that. Okay. And so if we look at marriage on the high level, it is two people coming together for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to build, for them to complete their religion together and for them to make other worshippers, right? That's on a high level. On a low level, the most basic level of the deen is organized sexual activity. That these people, you're a human being, you have sexual needs, and so it's organized in a way that nobody gets harmed. That's basically what's happened. There was witnesses, so we know they had a child. Whose child is this? Who's going to pay for the child? So it's clarity, right? That's on the most basic level, right? So on the most basic level, it's like, okay, this thing happened. Neither had the intention to have children, but there was a child. And it was already understood, if there's a child, whose child is it going to be? And who's going to support this child, right? So this is this key thing to understand. You're old enough to procreate. You have to be old enough to take responsibility for your actions. No one will be charged with more than they can bear. No mother or father should be made to suffer for their child. And the father's heirs are under the same obligation, i.e., if he's not around, they're going to have to support him, etc. But if both sides decide after mutual consultation to consent to wean the child, there is no blame in that. So they said, we're going to stop after 6 months or whatever it is, it's fine. And if they decide to have your children, and if you decide to have your children nursed by somebody else, so somebody, that's fine. It is permissible as long as you pay fairly. Meaning some other woman has said, you know what, I'll nurse the baby. Right? And you're going to pay her for the time that she did, for example, that's fine. Right? And so a key point here, the default in marriage, the default in any agreement is there has to be clarity. Right? Naha Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam an bay' al-gharar. Prophet forbade unclear contracts. Right? That's why things like insurance, normal insurance, is not permissible. Like you have life insurance. Okay, when are you going to die? How much did you pay? How much are they going to pay you back? There's a lot of gambling involved. They're gambling, and that's how they make money out of it. And you're gambling, and that's why it's useful to you, right? The Sharia has not allowed things like that. You can't say, for example, hey, just give me any food for any price. You have to say, I'm buying a pizza of this description for this price. Things should be clear, right? So here, how much is the baby going to drink? I don't know. How many times how long is the baby going to sleep for? Some babies sleep a lot. Some babies don't sleep. So here it's not clear. So we say, well, there should be a haram contract then, right? How much milk, how much is going to be delivered? How many goods are going to be delivered? How many milliliters of milk? I don't know. How many times is going to happen? I don't know. So here's a concept in fiqh, right? Is that yes, the default is whenever something's unclear, it's going to be a forbidden contract. But there's certain things, the nature of it is unclear. So here, we can't say that's a haram contract, right? You're going to buy an egg from a store. I want to open it first. Crack open 36 eggs to make sure you know exactly what you're buying. No. So there's certain things then that the deen is flexible in certain things when there's no way out of it. But when there is a way out of it, it tries to be as clear as possible. right? So the deen has a level of flexibility. This is an example of that. And it says, be mindful of Allah and know that Allah is all seeing of what you do. And as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, is that if a woman breastfeeds your child, that woman becomes like a mother to your child. Doesn't become your sister. So she's not a mahram to you, but she's a mahram to your child, right? So she got pregnant, for example, at 15, and she was breastfeeding your child at 16. Okay, and now your child is 20, and that woman is now 36, and he wants to marry her. You can't. That's your mom, right? So a woman who breastfeeds you is like your mother, and her children are like your siblings. So that's important to understand that. Like, oh, this is like this. Her children are like your brothers and sisters. And so if culturally that's not the case, too bad, right? Because that is reality, right? And it can happen that people, for example, marry somebody, they knew each other, the two mothers knew each other, so they kind of breastfeed each other's babies. And then later on, the kids got married, and it's like, that's that. What happens to that? The marriage is going to be annulled. So that means they've already had kids, but the marriage is going to be cancelled because you married your sister, right? Yeah, but she's not my sister. Yeah, she's biologically not your sister, but fiqh-wise, she's your sister because the same mother gave you milk as a baby and her milk as a baby, etc. So we have to be careful of these things. And then it says, widow's waiting period. What if your husband dies? It says, as for those who die and leave widows behind, let them observe a waiting period of 4 months and 10 days. So this is different, right? So being divorced, it is 3 months, but if your husband dies, it is 4 months and 10 days. When they have reached the end of this period, then you are not accountable for what they decide to do for themselves in a reasonable manner. Notice this. So again, in many cultures, she basically died and she's part of your family now. No, her husband has died. Now her husband's died, and now 4 months and 10 days are over. She wants to marry so and so, doesn't want to marry so and so. She's independent. So this is a problem we have, right? In the East, you have these issues where women's rights are taken away. Like in Jordan, there's a classic thing is brothers would look after the inheritance of the sister. What does look after mean? So it's like, subhanAllah, it gets to the level of haram, it gets to the level of kufr. It's like Allah has spelt out, this woman has these rights, right? Here it is in the Quran, and you're like, no, right? I have to look after her, meaning I'm going to spend her money. That's haram, you can't do that, right? And so, the same thing, like, it would be inappropriate. She married into our family, it would be inappropriate for her to marry somebody from outside of her family. Maybe she hates her family. Right? The point is she is still independent. That's the key thing. People think she's not independent. She loses certain independence while she was married. She wanted to do this. No, there's certain things she loses, but she doesn't lose everything. And now she's no longer married. She's not part of that family anymore. And Allah is all aware of what you do. Proposing to widowed or divorced women. So again, huge bid'ah in our time. Here's a woman. Why didn't she get married at 16? Because she was scared of getting divorced. Why? Because her aunt got divorced and her life was over, right? That's the situation. You go to many Muslim countries, divorced women do not get married. It's huge bid'ah. There's nothing wrong with a divorced woman getting married. In fact, right? Imagine, for example, let's it doesn't sound very emotional, but let's imagine, for example, you're going to employ somebody, okay, as a consultant. And he had his own business, which fell apart, and he saw another business fall apart. Why is he a good consultant? Experience. He sees the beginning of the end. He said, why? So you say, okay, why did the first one fall? Communication problems. It was all a WhatsApp communication, email. They didn't have enough meetings. They didn't have enough teamwork. So now we have to invest in teamwork. And now you save bit money, and you save time, and you save that company by these things. So by default, it is sunnah for a man to marry a virgin. That's by default. But sunnah doesn't mean the opposite is wrong, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, we mentioned this yesterday, all of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ had been previously married, apart from Aisha radiallahu anha. So if you're like, oh, that's weird marrying somebody, this woman, she's not a virgin, marrying somebody else, marrying somebody older than me, the Prophet ﷺ married. So Khadija radiallahu anha had been married twice. So she was 14, he was 25, and she had been married twice before him. Right? And so our mentality is off, right? As one of my teachers said, she trained me for free, meaning his wife. He says my wife's like a year or two older than me, or maybe even more than I said. She trained me for free. He says when I got married at 27, he said I was just about ready and did some pretty stupid things, right? But she trained me for free. So that's that mentality is like, no, oh, that means she's controlling you. No, that means you complement each other, right? That's how it should be, that each person complements each other. You do some stupid stuff, and she like, that's not, So there's a problem is, there's many issues. And I was talking to a board member, not here in this message, from another message. I was like, why do people not marry? Why do people not marry divorcees? And women who divorce, he says it's the whole problem is insecurity. Because everyone's feeling a sense of insecurity. What if he was like this and I'm like this? Right? It's like, it's okay. It's okay. So confidence is being comfortable with your imperfections. I'm disabled, and it's not a problem. I read 3 times slower than the average employee. It's fine. I just have to spend more time. I might come in early. If there's a meeting, I want to know I need to know beforehand. I'm heavily autistic, and I need to do this, heavily dyslexic. It's okay. I can still be a programmer. I can still do this. You might be a better programmer in reality, right? So whatever it is you have, is you're comfortable with it, as opposed to you never process that problem, right? You never process that problem. So it's like, it's totally fine. And, it's being comfortable with your imperfection. Yeah, I know I'm one-eyed. Yeah, I know this, I know that, whatever it is, not a problem, right? So it says, there is no blame for you to subtly show interest in a divorced woman. So what does that mean? There's a divorced woman. So here's a problem in our communities. Do we know who gets divorced? No, because it is a disgrace. So there should be some like this. It should be somehow, there is a list of people who want to get married, and that is accessible. And there is a list of people who have been divorced, and that is somehow accessible, right? It is known. And then you should be able to. So what the Quran is talking about is something that basically, I don't know where this exists in the Muslim world. There's a divorcee, right? You send a letter to her house and say, sister so and so, I'm sad that you had a divorce recently. Here, when your iddah is over, here's my number, here's my email address. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's exactly what the Quran is talking about. But in our culture, it's like, number one, why would you marry somebody who's been divorced? Number two, that's inappropriate. It's not inappropriate, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He says, or hiding the intention in your hearts, right? Where is it? It's going to come next. Okay. Allah knows that you are considering them for marriage, but do not make a secret commitment with them. So you can't do it explicitly. You say, sister, I want to marry you. You can't do that because she has emotions. No, she's still in her waiting period. That's not appropriate. What if then you had an agreement and something happened that shouldn't have happened, and now she has a child? Whose child is that? The ex-husband, or you? It's not acceptable. The child has a right to know. The society has a right to know. You were messing with society, right? So key concept, the deen doesn't actually control what you do. If you want to be a kafir, you can be a kafir. You can get away with it. If you don't want to pray, you can get away with it. If you want to commit zina, if you want to drink, you can get away with it. But anything that comes into the public realm, you publicly don't pray. You publicly do kufr. You publicly drink. You publicly destroy society by committing zina and having children. The Sharia comes down you with an axe. So were the people who prayed Fajr in the masjid during the time of the Prophet ﷺ who were not even Muslims? Yes. It's called a munafiq. They're standing there. They know that there's political benefit in turning up at Fajr, so they're going to turn up. You can't force them to become Muslim, but they did lip service to the deen. You got to treat them as Muslims. The Imam, we never see him in the masjid because he lives far away. He actually never prays. He lives in some other place. He never prays, but because he gets a salary, he comes and leads the prayer. It's a beautiful khutbah. Everybody cries and goes home. The guy's a coke addict and he's doesn't pray. That has nothing to do with the public realm until we see it. When it comes to the public realm, it's a problem now, right? It's a problem. So key concept, we do not police people. Only when it comes into the public realm. You said it publicly. You published a book. You did this, you did that, etc. So here, that's a problem. So you can't do that. So it says, but do not make a commitment to them. That's one translation. وَلَا تُوَاعِدُوهُنَّ سِرًّا. Don't make a secret promise with them. Sir in Arabic also means intercourse. Don't promise to sleep with them. Don't promise to sleep with them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, don't start talking to a woman who's in her waiting period about intimacy. That's not appropriate. You can't do those kind of things, right? You know, so there's a certain line of decorum, right? But the issue is we've taken decorum, we've sent it to Mars, right? We've taken adab and like everything is inappropriate. Meaning she's been married, that means it's just inappropriate for her to get married. It's inappropriate to talk to her. Everything's inappropriate, right? And so there's certain limits that Allah has put. Don't say things like that. That's not appropriate. That's not fair. She's not your wife. You can't say things like that to her. You can't be explicit. You can't say, I want to marry you because she's still in a waiting period, but you can do things like, here's my number, etc. So then her brother contacts you. Why did you send an email to my wife? Why can't I send an email to your wife? In Afghanistan, you get killed. In Yemen, you get killed. And like, so the deen is number two and culture is number one. So we have to be respectful, right? If there's difference of agreement, fine, But there's a lot of things where it's just like we make things stricter than they need to be, and then this sister can't get married, etc. Right? And so one of the things, for example, there was a sahabiya, and her husband died, and then she gave birth. Okay, and so in the past, right? In the past, women used to show off their weight, not show off how thin they were. So today you say your mama is so da. That's the kind of jokes they have today, right? In Jahili poetry, they say your mama was so thin. There's a line like that in poetry. It says your mama's so thin, her belt falls off. Right? They used to have your mama jokes back in the Jahiliyyah. So now it's the opposite, right? So she's now showing off I have weight because everyone's dying of famine, right? So it's like you have weight, right? Allah yatub alayna. Okay. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Okay. Okay, listen now. So again, a key thing is there's a lot of things in our mind we think are inappropriate because we're detached from the culture. Our culture is one thing, Islamic's culture is something else. So we don't read hadith, and just like a Christian, you never read the Bible. So you don't even know what we're talking about. Like you go to where are you from again?
Honduras.
Honduras. How many of those people read the Bible? None.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they would be saying that's rude, you can't say that, but it's in the Bible. Or that's okay, but it's in the Bible, right? So there's certain things Allah talks about in the Bible, in the Quran, and we think it's rude, right? So we think it's rude, that's inappropriate, right? You shouldn't say that. Or if you explained it, they say, yeah, but back then it was different. No, it's not. It's the same. So there's many things that we think, oh, that's not good, that's not this, that's not that, and it's like, it's inappropriate. It's not. It's just because we are overly pious. You know that word pious? Pious in the West doesn't mean taqwa. Piety is like oh, you think you're so special. You think you're like a priest and you're a monk. It's like, we're not. I'm not a priest. I'm not a monk. And the Prophet ﷺ, he came to Fajr once. He's like, oh, sorry, guys, I need to make ghusl. Like, imagine if the Imam did that. Sorry, guys, I need to make ghusl. What would they say? And there's a kid, they'd be like, dude, there's kids present. What's your problem? There were women present. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I'm a human being. I need to make ghusl. What's wrong with that? So just 1 second, you come back, you need to make ghusl. Right? So for us, it's like, oh, that's inappropriate. Because we are overly kind of sensitive because we don't read scripture. We need to read the seerah, we need to read the Quran, read hadith, and like, oh, that's the balance that I need. We're not here, we're not here, we're here. So anyway, excuse me. So it says, so do not make you can show interest to them in appropriately. Do not commit to the bond of marriage until the waiting period expires. Know that Allah is aware of what is in your hearts, so beware of Him, and know that Allah is all forgiving, bearing. So I was going back to the issue about divorced women, widow. So a widow, her waiting period is 4 months and 10 days. What if she gives birth the next day? So her husband died, and then she gave birth the next day. Then her waiting period is over. So there was a Sahabiya, she wanted to get married, and then her relative was like, no, 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 what are you doing? You got to wait for, 4 months and 10 days. So they asked the Prophet and said, no, it's fine. Right? So that means, right? Um, so, so it's very important to understand, like, women should be married. Men should be married. Women should be married. So the idea that there's unmarried people is not good. It's not good for society. Right? I don't know if it's still the case, but my friend who was in Saudi, he said, if you live in Saudi, unmarried men have a very difficult time because they're not invited anywhere because you're considered a loose cannon. Like they won't invite you for iftar to your house. So you just live there by yourself. You're like, oh, he's dangerous. Right? So you should be married. Men should be married. Women should be married. Everybody should be married. Right? The dunya should be in our hands and not in our heart. So what does the media do? The dunya makes the dunyas in your heart but not in your hand. You're not as good looking as that girl on TV. You're not as handsome as that guy on TV. You're always chasing after ideas that don't exist. You're always deficient, right? And you're always chasing after the things. Every advert will pull you. Every image will attract you, as opposed to if you are married and sexually active. It's like, whatever. Not a big deal. So they want the dunya to be in your heart but not in your hand. Whereas Allah wants the dunya to be in your hand, not in your heart. Right? Ibn Umar, what did he, Allahu Alam, is it sahih or not? But Ibn Umar, he's the one who told us the hadith, kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharibun aw abdu sabil. He's the one who heard from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, be in this world as if you're a traveler. Like you're not even part of the world. And he's the one who told Mujahid, the Tabi'i, he said, when you wake up in the morning, don't even think that you're going to be alive in the evening. When you go to sleep at night, don't even think you're going to wake up. Right? This is his mentality. If you saw him at Maghrib, he wouldn't be praying in the masjid, probably. Why? Because the narration says that he would seldom break his fast on anything other than one of his wives. Why? Because when he prays, I want to pray. I don't want to be thinking about anything else. You see that? The dunya is in his hand, but not in his heart. So we look at it, bro, that's so weird. Like you missed the prayer in the masjid and this. It's like, no, that's the thing. It's like, I want to pray and pray. Right? So is that true or not? Allahu Alam. Right? But there's lots of narrations like that. So the same person who is telling us about don't be attached to the dunya is sexually, like very sexually active. And he's traveling and comes back and he sleeps with so and so, so and so, and so and so. It's like, whoa. Because that's how the deen wants you to be. I want you to have the dunya, take the dunya out of your heart. You have enough dunya, like the dunya is out of my heart, and I just have one thing in my heart, which is Allah. The kuffar, our weird culture wants it the other way around. They want the dunya in your hand, the dunya in your heart, but not in your hand. You can't afford to get married. They culture you don't get married, and these thoughts are continually there. And you see sisters, for example, brothers and sisters continually joking. Brothers always joking about second wives. Like, dude, grow up, right? The women are always joking about inappropriate things. They do that, right? Women are always joking about things because the dunya is in their heart, but not in their hand. Whereas, like, sister, just, you have a husband, And so this is a reality, right? This is a reality. This is like how the world functions. And it's very important that we fix that. We fix the world in an Islamic way. Go to stop, inshallah. Divorce before consummation. So, because the marriage contract is a complex contract and has a lot of repercussions, it goes through stages, right? A sale contract also goes through stages, but it's obviously not as complex because it doesn't result in lineage, right? It doesn't result in other things, but marriage does. So marriage has certain stages. One of the stages is interest. So, so you are interested in so and so. Now the haram becomes halal. You can look at her. Before you couldn't look at her. So now you can look at her. Okay. Now you propose to her. So now the halal becomes haram. Someone else can't propose to her because you proposed and she said yes. Right. And then you married her. Right. And then you were alone with her. So what happens if you marry her? She's abroad, for example. You marry her and then you're going to be together at the end of the week. You marry her, but you haven't been alone together yet. So that's called consummation, right? Dukhul in Arabic. So it says there's no blame if you divorce women before the marriage is consummated or the dowry is settled, right? So Ahmed met Fatima at Panera, right? He says, sister, I don't mean to be rude, but you obviously look like a religious woman because you're sitting here with a hijab. Are you married? And she said, no. So he said, please forgive me, but will you marry me? She says, yes. So then he said, hey, Muhammad, Hamir, can you just, are you close by? Yeah. I need two witnesses. So they're sitting there in Panera and get two witnesses. And she says, I hereby marry you to marry you to my, I marry myself to you. And he says, I hereby accept the marriage. Okay. And then they start talking. By the way, what's your name? So my name is, I don't know, something. He's like, I don't like your name. I've decided to divorce you. Okay. Mashallah. Okay. Or whatever happened that they just said, okay, how is this going to work out? Where do you live? So I live in another country. Oh man, I thought you lived here. They no, I don't live here. So they said, okay, how is this going to work out? So they just got married and then they just got divorced. So what happens now? So he goes home. He's not married to her anymore. They didn't talk about mahar. There's no dowry and there's no waiting period. So she sat there and then Khalid came in. The same thing happened, right? So she married 50 men in one day, but she was never alone with 50 men. So she has no waiting period, right? And so obviously more practically, you married your cousin in another country. You're waiting for the paperwork to happen. It never happened. Things didn't work out. You found out certain things. They weren't happy and they just ended it. When can she get married tomorrow? She get married tomorrow, right? That's it. So there's no waiting period. And if you haven't spoken about mahar, there's no mahar. Easy, right? Simple as that. But give them a suitable compensation, and that's going to depend. So this is called mut'a. So mut'a is a term in Arabic which has two things. Mut'a is a temporary marriage, which is haram. That's what the Shia do, right? A temporary marriage which doesn't exist in Sunni Islam. And then mut'a also means the money that you give to your wife after divorce in certain circumstances. Okay, so we won't go through that right now. There's a whole issue of fiqh, but giving your wife or your ex-wife a certain amount of money is something else, right? That's called mut'a. The rich according to his means and the poor according to his means. A reasonable compensation is an obligation for the good doers. And if you divorce them before consummating the marriage, but after deciding on the dowry, so we agreed on $1,000 mahar. That was the mahar that they agreed upon. So after they did the contract and before they were alone. So here's a question: where does the party come in? The party is nothing to anything. So because culturally, that's the big thing. That's what marks it. Okay, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. In people's minds, it's like, oh, this happened at the Zaffa, this did happen at the Zaffa. It's like this is the wedding. It's like that's actually nothing to do with anything. So like for example, in Arab culture, or at least Levantine Arab culture, you have, this is they'll do the contract, but they're not considered married yet, and to not considered until they do the party, right? Because nobody knew about it. There's some fiqh correctness, but it's mostly incorrect. So now if they did something before the wedding, she turns up pregnant at the wedding, and was like, astaghfirullah, sister, right? When it's totally halal, right? And yet some people and some cultures would be like, oh, as long as they're engaged, it's okay for them to be alone. No, right? It's not halal so they don't know what the lines are. So the first line is you're interested. Now you can look. The second is you proposed and she or the family said yes. Now it's haram for anybody else to propose. The second stage then is you've done a contract. None of the stages is whether you did a wedding or not, right? Or what about the masjid? The masjid is not part of the wedding. What if you're marrying a Jew or a Christian? They don't go to the masjid anyway, right? So the masjid is not part of the wedding, right? Or where's the imam? The imam's not part of the wedding. The imam is just there to oversee things. He's an auditor. He's just there to make sure that nobody does crazy stuff, right? Because people do crazy stuff, right? So he's just there to make sure nobody does crazy stuff. He's like he's like the referee, that's all, right? You can still have a football game without a referee, right? So he's just there, just literally a referral. Sheikh, did I say the right words? Did she say the right words? Did it happen? Did that happen? Etc. Right? With the right questions asked, etc. Anyway, so what is it? So the stage then is so then dukhul, and then here the ulama debate. What does it mean to be alone? Does it mean you were alone, or does it mean something happened while you're alone? So the position of the Shafi'is is that it's intercourse. So you were alone. They were alone for 1 whole year. They've been married for 1 whole year. But in 1 whole year, nothing happened between them. Right? And they didn't talk about mahar, and he divorces her. Then what? She can get married tomorrow morning. She's no waiting period, and he doesn't have to pay for anything. According to the Hanafis, it is khalwa, right? So they went into the kitchen together. Did we all see them go into the kitchen? Yes. Tomorrow, in 6 months, she gives birth. Say that's her son. That's his son. Unless he takes her to court, you were alone with her. I don't care what happened, right? And this is what is applied, for example, in most Muslim countries, because most Muslim countries, the marriage law is Hanafi. So even like Sudan, where they're not even Hanafi, because they were Ottoman, and Ottomans are Hanafis, they'll apply that. And that's a legal thing that's the best thing to apply because, you're getting into details, people, privacy things. It's just, were they alone? These guys were together. They went on a honeymoon for like a year. So, now she gives birth. That's his child. End of story, right? And then, and it's just a side point as well. Who has a right to know what happens between the two of them? Nobody, right? So I don't know if this happens in Hispanic culture, but in Italian culture, they used to do this, right? This is how messed up it was. In Italian culture, what they would do is after the wedding night, is you would hold up a sheet. They put a sheet on the balcony with a blood stain to show, look, she was a virgin. You had to do that. So imagine if she wasn't a virgin, right? So this is how things were like, or she's not a virgin, or the bloodstain wasn't there, or whatever happens. This is messed up culture. Nobody has any right to know. Nobody has a right to know what happened to her, what didn't happen, right? If they go to court, sometimes things have to be asked by the judge. But the mum's asking, hey, is everything okay? The dad's asking, hey, is everything okay? That's inappropriate. You can't ask questions like that, right? Oh, they got divorced because they couldn't have kids. Right? Like, stop talking. It's nothing to do with you. You shouldn't get involved, right? That's nobody's business. What happens between people, right? And the books of fiqh, importantly, the books of fiqh, they don't talk about akhlaq. The books of fiqh don't talk about character. They talk about court situations, right? So what is the number one right that your spouse has over you is privacy. Number one right. You became extremely, privy to very private information. You shared somebody's body, right? And you go now talk about it. Super haram. What are the court repercussions? Nothing. So we don't talk about it in fiqh. But that's super important. Like, you got married, it didn't work out. Why? Nothing to do with you. The right of the husband, the right of the woman is like, if you can't honor that, where are you going to find yourself on Judgment Day? Right? You embarrassed somebody, you destroyed somebody's, feelings, all these things by sharing information about people. Totally, like, where are you going to find yourself on Judgment Day? Right? So this is a very important thing. Anyway, the point is, I'm sure we want to stop because we were supposed to finish 15 minutes ago, but let's look at something practical. She's been married twice. He's been married twice. They are not very confident about marriage. They have also been in haram relationships because it's easier, right? Many people in haram relationships because it's easier, right? They don't want to commit. So now she's starting to come to the masjid. He started to come to the masjid, and they're like talking about marriage. Like, man, forget that. Been through that, it was a headache, right? And you're like, brother, it's not that difficult. Why? Don't be alone with her. So what do you mean? We'll do a wedding in the masjid. Just bring some kit pizzas. It's not going to be difficult. It's like, what? Like, I don't have to have a celebration. Yeah, just bring some pizzas. Just do it something simple. Feed like 5 people, whatever, do something simple, right? We'll be a witness, give her some money, right? And then you can just do halal dating. Like, what? So yeah, just don't be alone with her. So then he's doing his life, she's doing her life, right? So you have to understand deen is for all people. Deen is for religious people and for irreligious people. And there's lots of irreligious people. There are people who will never come to the masjid ever, but they're still Muslim. There are people who never wear hijab, but they're still Muslim, right? There are people who don't come and ask scholars, but they still want to abide by Allah's rules. So we have to meet people where they are. And a lot of people, they don't know details. So you can say, brother, it's not that complex. Just get married, okay? Let's make it halal. Now you meet on the weekend. If you want to be intimate, go ahead. If you don't want to be intimate, don't just talk. See how it goes from 3 months. She was in a very abusive relationship before. She can also stipulate things like she has a right so she has a right to divorce herself if this happens, if that happens, right? Like in Singapore, for example, what they do is in the court, when you marry your wife, you say in front of the judge that she is divorced three times if I hit her, or if I don't do this, or if this. So they actually put that in the contract. They don't put it in the contract. It's just a post-contract thing. But there's clever ways to protect people or to deal with people in different cultures. Like, I can't be in the situation where I'm just thrown into this guy's house. I can't do that. I'm a Western woman. I've had my freedom for a long time. I've been through abusive relationships. I don't want to do that again. And so I'm forced to either go into a weird relationship or be in a haram relationship. And many people do that because it's just easier. I can navigate boyfriend, girlfriend. I can't navigate marriage, right? But there's ways around it. There's in between, right? So they can just just work it out. So I know, for example, this is not irreligious people, religious couple, right? Religious couple who I think both of them had been married before, but they were very different culturally, super different. So what they did is they agreed that they were going to go on a honeymoon, but have different rooms. So they could hang out, they could eat together, they can talk together, right? But then they have different rooms. So then if it doesn't work out for either side, they're like, yeah, it's okay. It's not going to work out. No waiting period, no iddah, easy move on. Not that complex. But again, in our culture, astaghfirullah, that happened in Brentwood. Astaghfirullah. It's like, bro, you don't know the deen. So you made the deen impossible. So many times this happens. You don't know the deen, so you made the deen impossible. And there's no way out. There's no way out for people. You forced me to do the haram. It's not like that. Right? So there's lots of different ways. We have to find out. There's many people that are in different, like there's a system that works in some countries, a system that works in countries, and other countries, a system that works for some people, system works for other people. As long as there's room for it in the Sharia, why not? The problem is we don't understand the Sharia to begin with. We don't know how flexible things can be. And so people are forced to do the haram. Because it's either copy and paste Afghanistan or nothing. Copy and paste Yemen or nothing. Copy and paste whatever. It's not like that. There's lots of different ways things can happen. Right? So let's just finish that. Let's just finish that as a whole question here. When a parents get advice on what to include in their daughter's marriage contract to protect them from oppressive, there's lots of things you can do there. So shall I have a whole playlist on marriage and these things? I talk about all of these things. So if you divorce them before consummating the marriage, but after deciding on a dowry, then pay half. So you did talk about the dowry. Now, just the fact that you got married. So again, this guy said, I will give you $10,000 if you marry me. He's like, okay. And then on the spot, he divorced her. So they got married and on the spot divorced it. Give me 5K. Thank you very much. Just because you married me. Right? Unless the wife graciously waives it or the husband graciously pays it in full. He said, I'll pay the full. Or she says, it's okay, I don't need it. Right? Graciousness is closer to righteousness. وَلَا تَنْسَوُا الْفَضْلَ بَيْنَكُمْ وَأَنْ تَعْفُوا أَقْرَبُوا لِلتَّقْوَى عَفْوًا. Right? So graciousness. Do we see graciousness in marriage? No. My way or the highway. That's what we see. Right? Everybody is harsh. Everybody's trying to get everything. That's not what it should be. Forgive and forget. Forgive and forget. Forgive and forget. So one of the reasons why people don't get married is because it's too scary, because everybody's so aggressive. but it's like, it's okay, right? What if I get married and I don't want to sleep with him immediately? I'm so scared. Of course you should be scared. Isn't that quite a complex thing? If I grow up as a Western girl and it's like it starts off with I had a crush on him when I was in grade 4, and then he gave me a thing in grade 6, and then I went to the prom with him in grade 9, and then this happened. There's stages, and suddenly you just throw me into a relationship. Of course, it's gonna be difficult. So why can't we be easy with people? No, my way or the highway. Force people into paranoia. Force people into very different. It shouldn't be like that. There should be understanding, right? But people aren't like that. People don't have rahmah, so it becomes extremely complex. Right? I remember there was one brother, he said, in Afghanistan, women are women and men are men. And, it's normal for a girl to cry for the first month of the marriage. And he was like, this is really good. And I was like, bro, that is messed up. Right? So these are kind of people who are like, yeah, yeah. And like, that's messed up. Right? Like, imagine, so what should you do? Like, you marry a woman and she realized, listen, I'm sorry. She's crying for 3 days, and like, okay, what's wrong? What's wrong? Right. And he's like, should I then, I'm actually deeply in love with somebody else. Astaghfirullah, beat her up. It's like, do you know what happened with Sayyidina Ali? Sayyidina Ali had a slave, female slave, right? Which is effectively a wife, right? And somebody wrote in front of her, right? He wrote it in the sand, and he realized it. He's like, do you like each other? He's like, go and marry her. It's like he didn't have a problem. He wasn't like, oh my God. It's like just like people have rahmah, but people can't give up. Like they have to kind of, things are very extreme, right? And so people, like you need to know what's going on and be gracious with people. And do not وَلَا تَنْسَوُا الْفَضْلَ بَيْنَكُمْ. Fadla means what? To do more. Yes, I know these are my rights, but I'm willing to overlook them. I know you don't deserve this, but I'm willing to give it to you anyway. And she does the same thing. I know that these are my rights, but I'm willing to overlook it. I'm willing that you don't deserve this, but I'm willing to give it to you anyway. Right? This is right. وَلَا تَنْسَوُا الْفَضْلَ. Surely Allah is all seeing of what you do. And then what does it do? Go straight into praying. Ya Allah, what's the relationship between marriage and prayer? If prayer isn't in your marriage, then you don't have a marriage. If you didn't get married for the sake of Allah, you're not married. Because it's just a dead marriage to begin with. If you didn't invest that money for the sake of Allah, because you have a strong relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you didn't invest. Doesn't mean anything. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the low level of marriage, and then brings you up to have ihsan, and then brings you up to connect with Allah in your marriage. Right? There was a sheikh, whenever he would do a contract, he would say, مَا كَانَ لِلَّهِ فَهُوَ الْمُتَّصِلُ وَمَا كَانَ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ فَهُوَ الْمُنْفَصِلُ. Anything that's for the sake of Allah, it's already connected to the akhirah. Doesn't matter what you spend, doesn't matter what happens, you're already winning. If it turns into a divorce, if she cheats on you, if this happens, doesn't matter. It's already connected to Allah. If you didn't do it for the sake of Allah, and you did it for this, you spent $50,000 on a wedding, and everybody still said you're cheap, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so frustrated. Why did you do that? If you do it for the sake of Allah, it's easy. Get married for the sake of Allah, get divorced for the sake of Allah, have children for the sake of Allah, lose money for the sake of Allah, gain money for the sake of Allah. It's all good. Right? So Allah jumps straight into the prayer, right? Jump straight to the prayer, because the two things are tied to the hip. Just like politics and prayer. What did Sayyidina Umar tell to his governors? He said, letter to the governors. Imagine the inaugural speech. What's it called? Inauguration speech, or whatever. Maybe he's talking for the first time to the governors. What did Sayyidina Umar say? Prayer, prayer, prayer. The most important thing for me is prayer, because if you don't pray on time, you're not going to make sure the roads are done on time. Period. Like if you're going to do that, if you don't pray on time, you're going to be a very bad governor, right? So maybe Sayyidina Umar and Sayyidina Trump have a similar thing, right? Make America pray again, right? Allahu Alam, may Allah guide us and all, right? It's not but it's like so prayer. So like, what happened in the wedding night? You didn't pray. It's like, bro, right? At the wedding thing, where when you planned the wedding, where were they going to pray? Oh, we didn't plan that. You planned the bar, you planned the DJ, but you didn't plan where people prayed, and whoever prayed, they prayed, inshallah, they'll pray. Right? As opposed to, no, this is what's going to happen. We're going to pray Maghrib at this time, and then at this time, etc. Right? Inshallah ta'ala. Okay, we'll stop there, inshallah. Sorry, I went over time today. So it's supposed to end 25 minutes ago. So I just keep talking and talking and talking. Allah forgive me. Subhanallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.